All right, so for my motor, I decided to see what effect the string would have on the motor itself. So I started out with this cord. It's just a twisted cord, like a heavy kite string. With that, I got 7 turns on my soda can. I used braided fishing line, which I don't know where it went. And that was 40-pound test braided fishing line. And that got me 19 turns. And then I used 10-pound monofilament fishing line, which is what I have hooked up right now. And with that, I got 28. So obviously the string plays a big role in how many turns you get. But so I never tested how many holes would get me the most rotations either. But I think the lighter, thinner fishing line will get you the best results. So, any thoughts on that? Anybody want to comment productively? You know, this is really for Josephine, not Grandma.
Do you think, or did you do more than 4 holes? Is there sort of a sweet spot as far as
I don't know.
how many?
I that's why I was hoping you guys would figure out, and then we could do that together. I don't know if the smaller holes work better, the larger holes work better. Yeah, it was just kind of what I stuck with one constant and then changed something else. So that was 4 holes in my can. I see a hand raise. Go on.
What would happen if you're using like a spider silk or steel coil, or like a steel rope?
Well, I think if it has stretch, that's the real thing. So the 2 ropes or 2 strings that I use, they don't have any stretch, so they twist up and tighten up really quickly. Whereas the fishing line, it'll stretch 20%, so you can get a lot more turns out of it before it binds up.
Good question.
That's a good question.
Marilyn has a question.
Yeah.
Forget it. Okay, come back to us.
All right.
Okay.
So what I actually wanted to see if anybody tried yarn, because I don't have any yarn here, and I just felt like that would be a big string, but it would be real loose, and so it would have the potential to turn really easily. So yeah,
We'll
that's
have
right.
to try the yarn when we do it. Marilyn remembered her question though.
Please.
Do you use elastic?
I don't know. I don't have any elastic.
Really thin elastic.
Yeah, or like that elastic cord, right?
Yeah.
Rather than flat elastic. Yeah, that's a good idea. If you have some, try it.
Got all sorts. We'll take notes. We'll do it.
All right. All right. You guys want to get on with the class? Liam? All right. Hey, let's go over parts of a rocket again, just as a refresher. So this is the rocket everybody should have by now. This is not done. If you just pull this apart, it falls apart. So I just set it together for us. But so work with me. You can look at the slides on the other video, or you can watch this one. Doesn't matter. But the top of this is the nose cone. It's very distinct. It's different colors from the body, right? And then you have the airframe. This one doesn't have a bulkhead, but a bulkhead is just some sort of separating, usually a piece of wood inside there. This one also doesn't have a true coupler, but we can see coupling tubes here, right? This is part of the nose cone, but that's what couples it with this. And then this is part of the fin can, which couples here. And then shock cord attachment, that's on the inside. The shock cord usually attaches from inside the tube to the bottom of the nose cone. There's a little tie there. Every video can see that. And then we don't have the launch lug on this yet, but we'll put it on here when we build this thing. The parachute, obviously, on the inside. Shock cord attachment, centering rings. Again, this is your rocket, so the centering rings will look something like that on that side, and then if you can see the green on that side, God dang, there's a centering ring in there, I swear. And then the engine mount is this white tube here that sits inside. We call this a fin can because it's pre-built for us. I'm gonna run that. All right. And we'll put an engine retainer on here and then the fins. So we're going to talk a little bit about rocket flight today. So any questions on the parts of the rocket right now? Yeah, go for it.
So the nose cone, is the part that they usually put the porcelain or something tiles on, so the entire rocket doesn't like burst into flames when it's going through the atmosphere.
Correct. Yeah, so usually not a big threat going up. They do have heat shielding, like you said, but it's coming back down as it re-enters the atmosphere. That the nose and really the underside of it will generate a lot of heat. So yeah, that's where the tiles go. Correct. So we're going to talk about Newton again. Does anybody remember what Newton's third law was from last class? Newton's third.
What goes up must come down?
No, God. I didn't use the ball. I was just holding it for fun last week. But if you kick the ball, it goes somewhere, right? So every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Does that sound familiar? All right, I'll take that as a yeah. But basically, that's how the rockets fly, right? That's how the rocket takes off from the ground. The gas out of the bottom of the rocket pushes it up, right? So that's an action and a reaction. But so Newton's first law states that objects at rest will remain at rest, right? But also objects that are in motion will stay in motion. And there's more to it than that, but generally speaking, that's what happens. Is if you throw a baseball, it keeps going. It doesn't just stop as soon as you let go of it, right? It keeps going. So that's your inertia. Rockets are the same way. These little engines, they only burn, I think these only burn for half a second. It's a really short burn time. But they expend a lot of energy when they do that. And then the rocket continues flying long after the engine is burned out. Some engines will only burn for maybe a second, but the actual total flight time is like 10 or 15 seconds. So that's a lot more energy that's exerted in a very short amount of time. But that's Newton's first law. So an object at rest will remain at rest, and then conversely, an object in motion will remain in motion. Question from the aviator, go.
So, when you are trying to get your rocket to take off, how much extra energy do you need in order to get it off the ground initially before it starts producing lift and taking off and flying on its own? Like, is there a
Yes.
It requires extra energy, right?
Yes.
It's not the same amount of energy as once it's in flight.
So I'm gonna go back over to the slide screen. I'm gonna try and show you guys something. It's called a thrust curve, and it might be hard to see. I tried to make it as big as I could, but what we're looking at here is a model rocket simulator. So this is the rocket data for this rocket, right? And on this screen, we can add engines just to simulate how it would fly. So we're going to select a new motor. We're going to use an A8-3 because that's a pretty common engine for this size of rocket. And what that means is it has a certain amount of energy that's expended over the entirety of the rocket. That's the A. 8 is how fast or slow that energy is expended, and 8 is actually slower than a 6. And then 3 is the delay from the time that the rocket stops firing to the time that the parachute comes out. Sorry, I clicked right out of it. So in this program, you can show details. And so this is the thrust curve. Can everybody see that? I don't know how to make it any bigger. Everybody see the red line?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see us very well. We're thumbs up.
Okay, all right. So basically what it is in the first 0.2 seconds, that's what the graph is, the thrust peaks, right? So that's the extra energy to get off of the launch pad. And there's a couple reasons that you want that. Like Emily was saying, you have to exert more energy to get something to move. But also you want the rocket to go as fast as possible before it leaves the launch rod. Because at a certain point, the fins will start to stabilize it. I gave away the next slide, by the way. The fins are going to stabilize the rocket as it comes off the launch rod. So you want it to be as fast as possible. You want the velocity to be as fast as possible. And then the rest of that curve is just the burn as it tapers off. And you can download this program and take a look at motor compositions and get to looking at how all this works, and potentially pick a better engine. But this A8-3 right here, it has an average thrust of 3.48 newtons, and its max thrust is 9.7 newtons, which, what does that mean? It means it exerts about 3 times more energy in that first 0.2 seconds than over the rest of the time. But it only burns for 0.6 seconds. But this rocket, this motor in your rocket will fly to 70 meters, which is, what is that? 210 feet, give or take. So pretty high for just a little rocket that only burns for half a second. So anyway, I'll send out the link to this if you guys want to take a look at it, especially for Liam, maybe Mary Lynn. It's really kind of cool to just see what different motors will do with your rocket and different paints and different weights and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What would happen if we put like a diesel engine in it?
I think the diesel engine would just sit on the pad waiting for nothing.
Or like a real rocket's engine.
Well, so that's the thing. These are real rocket engines. They're solid state rocket engines. But the way that they work is by combustion. So they burn rather than a motor turning a fan or something. Okay, so rocket motors only burn for a short amount of time. That's really all I wanted to talk about. And as they come to the top of their flight, the peak of their flight, it's called the apogee. And we're going to talk about the apogee a bit because it's kind of a very important time. That's the highest that your rocket goes. That should be where the nose cone pops out and pulls the parachute with it. So that's when your descent starts. But there's a number of different things that we have to kind of think through. So if you have a rocket that weighs this much and you put this engine in it, because you can get this exact engine in a different delay, you can get like an A8-2 or an A8-5, it will have a different delay, either 2 seconds, 5 seconds, or 3 seconds here. Then the parachute will come out at different times. So a 2-second one will come out while it's still traveling up, which can be dangerous. You can rip your parachute. conversely, it's 3 or 2 seconds after it starts coming back down that the parachute comes out. You can get tangles around your rocket and the parachute may not work. So that's why the rocket simulator is kind of important, is to start taking a look at what those numbers should be. And it'll just tell you, hey, the one you chose, your rocket's going to be traveling this fast when the parachute comes out. Maybe you don't want to do that. So you can go back and try a different engine. And that way you're not wasting money or crashing your rocket when you don't have to. But so at the very height of the apogee is a perfect time for us to measure how high, obviously, the rocket goes. It's actually very simple. So I'm not sure if everybody has it, but we can make what is called a marker streamer here. Sorry, a marker streamer. So it's just a chunk of ribbon, which is a special kind. It's called surveyor's or flagging ribbon or tape. And we need a penny and a little bit of tape. And that's it. So we cut it at 12 inches long, and we tape a penny on it, and you have a marker streamer. What's important about a marker streamer is if we can get this to come out at the very height of the flight, then we can time it as it falls and figure out how high our rocket actually went. So you just take and you just kind of fold this up in a little tiny ball so it comes out really nice and neat out of the rocket. And we put that on top of the parachute underneath the nose cone. So you would pack your parachute into the top, right? Poke your parachute down there and then put the marker streamer in and then put that on. And so when a parachute comes out, it'll also throw out the marker. And so all you have to do then is just time when that happens, and then when the streamer hits the ground, stop your time and times by 18. So if it's, let's say it's a 2-second fall, what would that be? Any ideas from the big brains on, no, the other ones?
I just did that in math today.
What is it?
Rate times your time. What is it? 18 times 2?
Times 2 is 32. 36. 36.
36. So you would have a 36-foot flight, which isn't very high for a rocket, but just a quick example. Now, if it's, let's say, 3.7 seconds, you're probably going to need I'm going to need a calculator, and that's fine. It's all right to do math in this case on a calculator, but we have to remember that these fall at 18 feet per second. So as soon as it comes out, it starts falling, and within, I think, it's a quarter of a second, it's falling at max velocity. So there's a little bit of fluff in that math, but it'll give you a really good idea of how high you went. So, highly recommend before next week, you make one of these and then test it. Find something that is 18 feet high and drop it. I think maybe Grandma's deck would be a great place for that.
You said a 12-inch streamer?
12 inch by 1 inch. It's on the screen. And then it calls for a 3-gram weight. So if you don't have a penny, if you're in another country, a paper clip, a standard size paper clip, which is about 2 to 2.5 centimeters long, weighs about 0.5 gram. So you'll need 6 paper clips, and just tape them to the end of that, and you will get the appropriate weight. But a 3-gram weight and a 12-inch streamer by 1 inch. So yeah, that is what that is. And you can find the roll of flagging tape at Home Depot. It may not be exactly 1 inch, but just cut it down to 1 inch, and it'll be fine. Or have your mom cut it down to 1 inch. All right, so any questions about marker streamers and how that would work? Does anybody not understand how the parachute comes out?
We're good. We're good.
Thanks, Mom.
So once it hits its apogee, that little nose cone will just pop off?
Yeah, And again, that's why the Open Rocket software is helpful, because it will tell you what the apogee should be, so you can get the timing right. Because it's the motor timing that is important here. So a 3-second delay. Let me see if I can get that close enough. A83, right? So this is an A-sized motor that expends its energy at an arbitrary number called 8, and it has a delay of 3 seconds. So if you had a slightly more powerful motor, a B motor, that expends its energy faster at a rate of 6 somethings, for my rocket, you would need a 6-second delay. And then, technically the apogee is at 5.5 seconds, but the amount of fall is not very much in that half second. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
That's good.
Let's talk about how we get our rockets back, right? We've talked about parachutes a lot, but there's different ways to recover a rocket. So we're going to talk about the different ways. Jump in if you got any questions. You guys are little tiny squares on my screen, way far away, so don't raise your hand, just interrupt, please. So parachutes. Parachutes are the most common. They generally look like this. They can look like that screen right there if you're looking at the slides. You can have a number of parachutes. This particular one has 2, but you could potentially do more, especially if you had a bigger, heavier rocket that you were trying to lower very slowly. Dogs. The next one is a streamer. And so a streamer is a long piece of fabric, usually very similar to a parachute fabric, but it acts as kind of a bit of drag to slow down the parachute or down the rocket, rather than a parachute. And we'll talk about why you might use that. And then we get into kind of some different ones, some cooler ones. You can have a helicopter, and there's a number of different ways to have helicopter recovery. This particular one, the helicopter portion is inside the tube. They also make them that have them outside the tube that becomes an integral part of the airframe. And so when it reaches its apogee, the top just comes up a little bit, which activates the helicopter blades, and then it descends like you see in the picture. The next one is a glider. The kind of cool thing about gliders is you can have multiple different recovery systems in a glider style. And with any of these, you can have multiple recovery systems. So this rocket has 2 parachutes, right? So it has one for the nose cone and one for the body. But you could potentially use a streamer for the body or a helicopter for the body, and a parachute for the nose cone, or maybe the nose cone glides, So there's different ways that you can recover these things. But this particular glider on the screen, the rocket portion at the apogee, it actually ejects off of the glider portion, and so the rocket will come back with a parachute. The glider will just glide down. And that's how most gliders work. I've seen them as a piggyback style, so it's like a glider on the side of a rocket, and then at the apogee that ejects off the side, and then the parachute comes out of this one. So there's a number of different ways to do that. Sorry. And then you have tumble and break apart. So I couldn't find a good example of a rocket that was a tumble or a rocket that was a break apart, but I did find one that is a tumble break apart. So what you're looking at here is a 2-piece rocket. And basically the red piece at the ejection comes out of the back, and the gray piece goes forward, and then they fall to ground separately. So again, this is a 2-part solution where you have a tumble break apart rocket. But these are normally very small, so you're not really worried about them coming down so fast that they might break on impact. But generally, the ones that don't use parachute or something like that are pretty durable little and small rockets. And then the last one we're going to talk about real quick is called the featherweight. And so the cool thing about a featherweight is we will have a motor retainer in our rocket, right? And it's a little clip that holds on to the motor right here. So it'll come out and it'll just hook over the end of the motor. The featherweights, they don't have that, right? So the only thing holding that rocket in maybe is a little tiny piece of tape. But when the ejection charge, which would normally throw your nose cone out, when your ejection charge comes out, it actually throws the motor out. And so that makes the rocket just that much lighter. That allows it to just fall to the ground. Again, a tumble style of recovery, but specific to this rocket is it ejects the motor to make it that much lighter. And usually these rockets weigh less than an ounce, so they're very, very lightweight, pretty small. This one that you see on the screen is not going to be much bigger. The body is not going to be much bigger than the motor itself. And that nose cone is glued on. All right. Any questions on recovery right now? Any other thoughts?
What if we had a drone that flew after it, and when it started falling, it grabbed it?
That's actually an interesting concept. What I would recommend you Google is helicopter recovery of rocket. Okay? So what you will get is not a helicopter recovery on a model rocket, but you will see how a company is trying to recover space rockets with helicopters. And it's pretty cool. I think there's some videos out there too. So I would take a look at that. It scares me, but someone's bold enough.
Wait, are they sending helicopters into space to get rocket stuff that's still in that space?
No, after the rocket comes back down, so it doesn't hit the ground hard, they have some system where they can catch it basically with a helicopter.
Oh.
Just like you're saying with a drone, but on a bigger scale. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the two most common recovery. You have parachutes and streamers. Any idea why you might, it might be on the screen, why you might choose a parachute over a streamer? Go for it.
Because the parachute makes the rocket go way slower and just floats gently to the ground.
Yeah. So why use a streamer at all?
Because it slows it down just enough. If you shoot a rocket at an enemy base, but you don't want it to go super far down, so it explodes the ground, not the base, you might have a streamer so it slows down just enough to land inside the base.
I have never heard of that, but we're going to pass that on. Yes, it does slow it down just enough. But also with streamers, they don't catch the wind as much as a parachute might, right? So a parachute, it's coming down slowly, and if the wind blows it, it's just going to blow because it's a lot of surface area that could catch the wind. A streamer, I'll actually open this up. Streamers are pretty long.
Frank has a question.
So this is a streamer, right? And it'll slow it down enough.
Frank has a question.
Yeah, go on, Frank.
What happens if the rocket hits the parachute and makes it head faster? It heads up and the tip, or it goes on top of the parachute.
Well, you can have bad crashes. Yeah, sometimes you have bad crashes, and that's all right. We're gonna learn how to build rockets and then maybe repair rockets too. But yeah, so most of the time you use a streamer like this in my hand. because you don't want your rocket to drift very far. So maybe it's a higher wind situation, or maybe you're going to fly a rocket really, really high, and it's going to be completely out of sight, and you don't want to lose it forever. So you can use a streamer to just slow it down enough, and then you have the potential to get it back. So my new rocket, which we're still working on, which this streamer is for, should be able to fly a mile high. And that's kind of my goal. So we're gonna keep building it. But that's why we're using a streamer instead of parachute on that one, is because it will go so high. It would end up, in the next county if I didn't use a streamer.
When will we actually launch the rockets?
As soon as we can. Any questions? I honestly don't know right now. I've got pretty well everything set up. So we got to get together and do it. But we're still probably 2 weeks away from finishing our rockets, and hopefully the corona situation will be a little bit better and we can launch some rockets. I know Josephine is excited about that. No? All right.
Are you excited to launch a rocket? Yeah, she's nodding her head. Yes, she's excited.
All right, so parachute information is there. Parachutes can be made out of different materials. This one's plastic. They can be nylon. The streamer is mylar. So parachutes can also be made out of a mylar type of material. And then the shroud lines can be almost any material. This is almost like a thin yarn, but they can be more out of a kite string, a heavier cord, depending on what kind of rocket you're flying. You can have a spill hole, so kind of like what Frankie was talking about, a hole in the top of your rocket, or in the top of your parachute, which would it allows air to come through it, and it keeps your rocket from swinging. Now, we're flying fairly small rockets, so not really a big issue for us. But if you had a big, heavy rocket, that might be something that you think about is keeping that weight from swinging. Yeah, and then streamers. Really not much to know about streamers. They say the best ratio is 10 to 1. This one I think is 3 by 56, something like that. So it's longer than 10 to 1. And again, it's a slightly heavier rocket that I'm going to fly with it. So a slightly bigger streamer. We're just going to talk about fins for a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap this up, okay? So there's different types of fin shapes, and there's a number of reasons why you use one over the other. Fortunately, someone was kind enough to put it on a slide for me, because I didn't make that info. But can anybody identify what fin shape this would be?
It's a little hard to see, but I think that you have a delta, maybe a swept.
Let me show you a tapered swept. You see a difference? I think Aunt Emmy might be wrong. So this is a tapered swept. This would be called a trapezoid. Very good. Very good. So trapezoidal are kind of an all-around fin shape. They're good for a lot of different things. And they can come in slightly different forms. But for the most part, it's pretty standard trapezoid shaped. But then the other type you'll see commonly is called a swept, tapered swept. And then you have clip delta, which is very, very similar to this, except this bottom edge is straight across instead of angled down. So those are kind of the three big ones that you'll see commonly on rockets. And then the other ones there, maybe you see them, maybe you don't. It's just kind of hit or miss. But so we'll talk about like center of pressure and center of gravity next week, but I just wanted to go over this real quick. So the reason you might use a tapered swept over another kind says on the screen it moves the center of pressure back. So if you were having trouble balancing your rocket, you might try this style of fin if you didn't, or if you could make that choice. With our rockets here, they've made the choice for us, and that's fine. It actually moves the center of pressure forward, which means it has to be heavier at the front than at the back. So we have to, and we'll figure out where the balance points are on our rockets. And then the clip delta, like they say, it's a good one for high performance rockets. It's really kind of the best of all worlds. It's a real stable fin type, but it's also got a lot of surface area against the rocket body here where it won't come off. So a high performance rocket can actually rip fins off while it's flying. So, yeah.
Uncle Ben, what happens if you took like basically any kind of shape? I'm just gonna say like a triangle thing, put them on the rocket, but had them like slanted a tiny bit. Would the rocket spin as it's going up?
Yes, and it
That
doesn't.
was awesome.
It doesn't take much. It can be kind of cool, but you're making an unstable rocket, so you have to be careful.
Yeah.
So one of the things you can do, not with our fins, but with wooden ones, when you shape them, when you cut them out and sand them down and everything, you can round the top edge, and we'll talk about that. But if you don't do that right, you can actually create a wing which will cause it to spin as it flies up. And what happens is the rocket spends a lot more time spinning than going up, and they just don't go as high. So it's not ideal if you're trying to get height, but if you just wanted to do it for kind of fun, yeah, you can definitely do that. Okay, so rocket fins, they kind of change everything about the rocket. Where you put them and what style you choose, it affects a lot of what you do. So just something to kind of start thinking about for next time. And we'll go back over this on the next class, but that's kind of about it for now. Any other questions before we get to homework? I'm just piling it on you guys. For homework, we're going to try and recover, instead of a rocket, we're going to try and recover a house key. Okay? So, for your homework on the screen there's a couple different things. Notebook, house key, very important. After that, use your imagination, right? So if you wanted to try to build a streamer to slow your house key down, try to build the best streamer. If you wanted to do a parachute, build a parachute, but build the best one to slow your key down. It can be anything. It could be a glider. Try to stick to model rocket style recovery systems. Okay? Your parents, not yours, Emily, you're the parent. Your parents have this slideshow, so you can go back and review the different types of recovery systems, but use a house key, find a not a known distance, but use the same spot to drop whatever you're dropping, okay? And the trick is to try and slow down a key as much as possible. So I'll just start out with, I did a helicopter recovery. This thing. It worked all right until I put a key on it. But it spins and it slows down binder clip pretty well. Then I used a box and I made this little helicopter thing. It works all right, but it takes a second to start spinning to slow down the key. So then I went all out and I made this abomination of foam board and dowel and duct tape. Again, it works well right, but it takes a second for it to start spinning, and that was the problem. I didn't want to have to wait. So I finally built this, which is a pinwheel with a key taped to the bottom of it, and it works amazing. So you can't use pinwheel, but use something else. Unless you build a... What's that?
Can you show us the pinwheel thingy dropping?
Right? It's kind of boring. Sorry. It's a small screen. But hey, stand at the top of your stairs, stand on Grandma's deck, just drop whatever you've designed, and time it. That's the important thing. You want to time everything because that's how we're going to measure how slow something goes. So for me, the pinwheel was the slowest, but you may find something else, something that I haven't thought of. What's up?
So there's lots of math involved.
There's a bit of math involved. It's more timing than everything else and taking notes. So, yeah, I went through, 4 different styles before I figured out that the pinwheel was going to be the best one. And then making it stable took me a little bit. But after that, it worked out pretty well. So, yeah, let's see what you guys come up with next week, okay? All right, any questions? And build your marker streamer. And finish your homework from last week. Quit screwing around.
Okay, double the homework. We'll do it.
Hey, we're going to start building next week. So, prep. There's like 2 cuts you have to make.
Okay.
And I think that's it.
Okay.
But anyway, so on the motor tube, little white tube, it's 2 1/4 inches up, right? So, measure up 2 1/4 inches and then make a 3 millimeter cut in it carefully. And that is for the motor retention clip. Okay? So this little clip, it has to go into this cardboard, and there's no cut on this cardboard. So just make a little nick that's that wide that can go in as 2 1/4 inches up. The other one is, the other one is on a centering ring, green centering ring, also for the motor retention clip. You just need to cut a section of it for the width of the clip here, and just cut that out so it'll be a C shape after you're done. And I think that was it. For the fin can, they had the plastic tabs from making this on the inside here. The motor mount should go all the way through like that. The plastic on mine didn't allow that to happen, so just take your knife and nick those out and you should be good, if yours has them. But that's it. Questions? Okay. It's in the instructions too.
Okay.
So, look
That's
at those.
good.